I would just like to say, I think it's kind of inevitable that people have got plans locked in. It's very hard to deviate from that now, but I just think that the government should kind of if it's not going to change the actual direction, it should give a much stronger message that, getting together for a massive shindig at Christmas isn't necessarily a great idea. I just given you got two professors there, eminent professors, both with different opinions, one of them still being very cautious about things, I think it's probably best to err on the side of caution, given the fact that we've hardly covered ourselves in glory in dealing with the pandemic so far. Really, we haven't, and I think that we just seem to be going for broke. Really, as in we've done so badly so far. Let's make an obviously daft decision, and let's carry it on. I know that's not what they're doing. They're trying to give everybody a Christmas, but I just think when you look at it, I think it's not a very bright decision in the context of a lot of scientific advice is saying it's a very bad decision. Those two medical publications said the same thing today. And why would you take it? Why wouldn't you err on the side of caution when we didn't err on the side of caution before and got clobbered for it?
Stay there, Mike. I'm going to bring Paul in Kingston Upon Thames into the conversation. Paul, you have a different view, I think.
I do. I don't buy into that sort of slave morality at all. I'm having a do on Christmas Eve. I do call it slave morality. Caution really a word for like cowardice and being like scared and being like cowed.
How is it slavish?
Whether it's a slave morality, without a doubt. Okay, you should read a bit of Nietzsche. He explains it quite well, turning past personality traits that are actually ones of weakness into ones of strength. Look, whether we have a lockdown or we have a release over Christmas, we're still going to be having a lockdown in January and February, because the government, although I am actually normally a Tory, seems to have lost all control of dealing with this pandemic, and should be dealing. I mean, the way we should be dealing with this more is, although you have to obey science, this is a political decisions here have to be made, not decisions based on science. If you follow science to the absolute degree, scientists would say, right, everyone stay in for 5 weeks, and I mean everyone, and then after 5 weeks, it would go. So we're not going to follow science to the exact route. There has to be some sort of mediation between doing what's politically correct, jobs, economy, suicide, and this, that, and the other, and getting rid of the pandemic. And I think we've gone too far the other way. So, if the lockdown works, why are we doing it again? And if it didn't work, why are we doing it again?
So what are you doing at Christmas?
I've got about 18 people coming around Christmas Eve, and we'll be having a small do.
18 people from how many? How many households?
Probably about 5.
So you're deliberately flouting the guidelines. Hope you feel proud of yourself.
Because hang on. I think you can still be sensible and make decisions for yourself. You don't have to necessarily obey everything the government always says. As we well know from the past, the government is not always right. Okay, and we just had 2 different advice on the science well tonight.
Mike.
I just think that, first of all, I'm reluctant to watch out anybody quoting slave mentality. The reason why I think the guidance should be followed, really, is that
I said morality.
You should try and avoid doing harm to others. So I don't want to go and infect other people. So, but again, you have your party, it's fine. I can't stop you. You're not going to do that. But, I always watch out for people quoting Nietzsche straight away and saying slave mentality and things like that. I mean, it's just that.
It's morality, not mentality.
You did actually say something what I kind of agree with early on. I think that, in reality, you're right. We should have had a very severe lockdown where the guidance was nobody bloody hardly moves for 5 weeks, and we would have stamped on this virus like they did in places like Australia.
It was okay to have a hard lockdown at the beginning where we weren't sure what we were dealing with, but it soon became fairly apparent that most deaths, and I've looked at the statistics on this, are of elderly people in their 80s. Now, if you're in your 80s and you're vulnerable, you're not going to go to a pub, you're not going to go to a nightclub.
No, what's going to happen is everybody's going to come round to your house at Christmas.
Well, no, they're not, are they? Because if you're safeguarding, you don't allow them to come round. I mean, we seem to have lost all ability to make decisions for ourselves about the way we want to live our lives. And we just seem to weekly and meekly obey the government. Oh, the government says this, the government says that.
I don't care what the government says.
Giving rules that are wrong. Well, you do.
I don't care what the government says.
No, you do. Because if the government said there's no lockdown, you would have a big moan about it. But you wouldn't.
Since the pandemic started, I've deliberately avoided everybody. I've tried to work from home where possible, and I've avoided my parents and anybody who's vulnerable. I don't care what the government says. I was kind of locked down before it started.
So it wouldn't bother you if the government ended the lockdown then? We wouldn't hear you complaining. If the government said no more lockdown, from now on, everyone makes their own decisions. If you want to safeguard, we'll spend all the money at the moment we're wasting on unemployment, and we'll spend it on looking after the truly vulnerable. And
what I'm saying is I make decisions independent of the government to be cautious and to be sensible, as in not to spread the virus to people I know.
Would you just answer that one question? Would you be bothered if the government turned around and said, OK, no more lockdown?
I think it'd be a foolish decision. So yeah, it would be bothered. It's a daft decision.
You just said you don't really bother what the government does. You make your own decisions. Which one is it?
Because I already made a decision in line with what they made. The decision they made was subsequent to my decision. Before they announced any lockdown, I was already avoiding my parents and avoiding anybody I might cause harm to.
Do you actually
before the lockdown happened, I was staying clear of everybody who might be vulnerable because I'd seen what happened in China, and I basically avoided them because I care about them.
So you don't need the government to do that. You can make your own decisions.
Yeah, I know, but you clearly you could do with a bit of guidance because you're going to be responsible for bringing a load of people around to your house. And some of those people might get infected and some of those people might die. Well, you can do what you like, but you've got to bear the consequences.
That's the choice they've made. It's called freedom. That's the choice they've made. But just because they come around my house doesn't mean they're going to go around and visit their
Can I ask you a question, Paul? How many of these 18 people are over the age of 70?
None.
Well, thank goodness for that.
None. But it's an age range from about 30 to about 60, right? And no one's... they can come around, they can meet, but they can still be quite self-aware about who they go and visit, okay, knowing who's vulnerable. And those people who are vulnerable should be able to be quite aware who comes to visit them. We're showing all the pubs and everything, okay? But if you think about it, most people who are dying, and it is true, are over 80. They don't go to pubs.
How many people are
to nightclubs?
What's the age range of people being hospitalised, though? Lots of people in their 40s and 50s.
No, they're not.
No. Do
you know how many people have died under the age of 40? About 44.
Well, I'm aware of... Well, I can't even say, but I'm aware of people who are much younger than you expect who've actually died due to the virus.
You see, what we need to do, when we talk about these facts and figures on the radio, we do need to sometimes give out more often, I don't think it's done often enough, how old it is the people who are dying. The amount of people who've died under the age of 40, up to about 10 days ago, was about 44.
Yeah, but people who are those ages can still contract it and pass it on to other people. That's the issue.
Well,
Yes, they can. One of your... Just let me finish for a second. Paul,
it can't be passed on to them, can it?
One of your 18 people could have it without you knowing it, without any of the other 18 people knowing it. They could pass it on to you, and then you could inadvertently pass it on to the next 85-year-old that you meet. That's the point.
I don't meet any 85-year-olds. If I did, if I came into regular contact with people over 80, then I wouldn't meet up with young people.
What about people over 60 or 70 or 50? Because they are vulnerable to it as well. There's been quite a lot of people hospitalised who are 50 plus and 60 plus.
Well, listen, once upon a time we were willing to sacrifice our lives for freedom. Now we sacrifice our freedom for life.
Good soundbite.
No, you're just missing a Christmas. You're just missing a Christmas party, pal. Come on. You're missing a Christmas party. Jesus Christ. You're missing a Christmas party.
Most people who are dying would be dead next year anyway. Right?
There we go. That's great.
Oh, dear. You've just lost the argument. If you hadn't done it before, you lost it with that one.
No, I didn't.
You're missing a Christmas party. Maybe just have a Christmas party in April when people have been vaccinated.
Listen, we have about 1 in 100,000 people very roughly dying. If we lived in a city-state of 100,000 people and one person a day died, we would not change our whole way of life, would we? You do need to look at statistics. You can't just all these anecdotes and all this weeping. I mean, for every guy you say who died, which you think I'm joking about, which I'm not, I could maybe point to somebody who died of cancer who's 40 who didn't get treated because we're putting everything in COVID, or somebody died of suicide.
Yeah, well, if we try and limit the virus, there'll be more facilities for people to get screened for cancer and other things. If you let it get out of control, there'll be less facilities to screen people.
Well, maybe
so far, the virus has been limited. So far, the virus has been limited to the population. So far, because measures have been taken, albeit pretty crappy measures, the virus hasn't got to everybody it would otherwise have got to. And in many situations where you have an aggressive stance, like Australia, for example, Australia is now in a situation whereby they're having no endemic indigenous disease. So they're now able to get their economy going back again.
But there's too many variables involved. Don't use other countries, right?
Other countries are quite good. Germany's a very good statistical model for us. Germany's done much better than we have. Australia's done much better than we have. Lots of other countries.
Don't use other countries. Use your own country. There's too many unknown variables, right, that can queer the picture.
So how many people? So if the virus gets to everybody in the country, or infects, like say 40% of everybody in the country, how many people will die as a consequence of that? Because so far it hasn't infected anywhere near that.
Okay, and if we keep going the way we're going, how many people are going to die of suicide? Another unrelated illness.
Nowhere near the same amount will die from the virus. And secondly, there's a vaccine coming out. There's a vaccine getting rolled out. There's a vaccine getting rolled out in the next 4 to 5 months. Lots of people will have been vaccinated.
And
so your
what
argument's a
happens
bit
if
weak,
that
really,
doesn't
because
work? No, it doesn't. What happens if the vaccination turns out not to be that good? What happens if in 2 years' time we have another epidemic? We need to look at the bigger picture of how society in the future.
Well, it'll have been caused by people like you.
What about dealing with one epidemic at a time?
By people like me. Right?
Deal with one epidemic at a time. The current epidemic we have. Because,
I'll tell you what, if we carry on this way, this is just going to roll on for months. You talking about
perpetrated by people like you. Perpetrated by people like you, because you may not meet 85-year-olds, but you probably meet 20 or 30-year-olds. Have you ever heard of long COVID?
Ian, this lockdown is going to roll on, and more people are going to get sick of it. We need a society to learn a way to live with this virus and maybe other ones that might come down the line as well. Okay, and also you need to do more of a cost-benefit analysis.
With respect, having 18 people over on Christmas Eve does not achieve that. It's the height of irresponsibility, and I hope those 18 people ring you up between now and then and say, sorry, Paul, we've had another think because we're more sensible than you, and we're not coming. Happy Christmas, Paul.